Randy, the co-president at Practica Learning, and he helps organizations to grow and develop using a combination of deliberate practice programs and business improvisation. And his focus is on improving the quality of important professional conversation, whether they're internal, like coaching, leadership, DEI, peer-to-peer, or external, sales, customer service, and partners. And Randy's going to be talking about a super timely topic right now. And it was just mentioned by Teresa and Jen in the previous session, where he's going to be talking about DEI learning and development, a roadmap to accelerate change and adoption. So everybody, please join me in welcoming Randy. Go ahead, Randy. Virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, virtual Bobby. I can't wait to share a beer with the real Bobby again at some point.
Coming soon, Randy. Coming soon.
Oh, I can't wait. And let me extend that invitation to all you out there in virtual land. I miss you guys all terribly. I really loved standing in those groups with a beer and not knowing anyone and everybody opening up and talking, and Bobby, all the games that we play at night in the casino or there was always something to do at these conferences, and I miss them terribly. So fix it for us. Would you fix this, please? Okay.
Actually, that's a good transition real quick, so I can make another shameless pitch about our polls.
Sure.
Actually, a poll on the platform about when everybody thinks they'll be able to travel and we can go have some great coffee. My events always have good coffee.
I want to make sure that I am sharing the correct screen. To share, you should see a couple of circles, Bobby.
I see a couple circles and a big red one in the middle.
That's all I'm going to show today.
That was fantastic, Randy. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's questions, please. Yeah, I appreciate everybody coming out. First of all, I wanted to set some context on what we're going to talk about. DEI is a huge subject, and it goes all the way from systemic to policy, and the area that Practica Learning is involved in our expertise for the last 20 years have been helping people with important conversations. So although we do a ton of work and a ton of research on DEI, our focus is having really good conversations with people and practicing that and working on measuring the skills inside of those conversations. So for us, that's what I'm going to focus on today, because I just want to speak about what I know. The intersection between our DEI policies and strategies that we've all created at our organizations on one hand, and the learning and development content and strategy and design and delivery, I think cross over at this place that the ladies from Merck talked about earlier, which was change. Is about implementing change and executing on your strategy. By the way, what a great presentation. That was wonderful. I would applaud if we were in a stage. And so thank you for that, Teresa and Jen. So change for us is at that level, at that conversation level, two people having a conversation. So that's where we're going to focus on. Okay, I'm clicking, but nothing. There we go. So what I'd like to share today is some of the themes from these DEI presentations that we've had. I think I'm up to 18 of them now. We've been doing a lot of roundtable discussions and sharing information along with what we've been asked to do in the last year, 2 years with diversity, equity, inclusion conversations for our clients. So a combination of those and what we've learned. Then we're going to watch a video on a real deliberate practice session, a role-playing session. It was edited for confidentiality, of course, to protect the innocent. But it's a real practice conversation that's edited down, and it's much shorter, of course. So we'll talk about that. It's a meritocracy or a fit conversation. I want to hire my buddy because we went to the same university. And then, how do we work around that? So you could see how the strategy might influence the actual execution. And then we'll talk about what's next and what we think it might be appropriate for next steps. So the trends that we saw it was very interesting for me listening to the Merck presentation, because the trends that we saw are consistent to what they did. Basically moving from a one-size-fits-all to a granular, type of approach down to the individual. When COVID first hit, we saw a lot of people with L&D workshops or DEI workshops converting them to virtual. And they would take a 2-day coaching or a 2-day leadership workshop and do it 2 days on Zoom. Everyone quickly figured out that no one could pay attention and absorb or retain anything on a 2-day workshop from Zoom. Why we thought that was okay in a live environment, maybe that's a debate for another day. But what happened is that a lot of complexity and unnecessary content got removed from those workshops so that they really focused. And that really helps with retention and attention, and really gives us the ability to be creative in those situations, because complexity kills creativity. So extract all the information. How hard is it to remember a 12 by 12 leadership matrix when you're having an intense conversation with one of your peers or someone that works for you? So, it's important to remove that complexity. Excuse me. So as a continued trend of that, we saw that things were focusing even smaller. So those workshops got shorter, there was less people in them, and then it started focusing on individual. So what are the 2 or 3 skills that I need as a manager or a leader or a frontline salesperson even? What are the 2 or 3 skills that I need to get better at? The 1 or 2 things that'll really make a difference in implementing change, especially DEI change, because those conversations are incredibly difficult and important. So that granularity went down to, let's focus on spending half an hour with an individual rather than spending 2 days with 200 individuals. The ROI data on that is quite fascinating because people are actually implementing change. The ROI is much better, even though the individual cost might seem higher at the moment. All of this, these first 2 trends are really supported by a ton of research, all the brain-based stuff, all the deliberate practice stuff, micro-learning. We've all read about that for the last 10 years. And COVID kind of helped us force into that reality. The third trend that we saw was, it's about time we converted our DEI strategies into reality. We've been talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in some form or another for a long time, forever, it seems. Certainly, most large corporations we've talked to have had policies for 10 years or 5 years, and then really kickstarted them in the last year. But it's time to move it from talk, from town halls, from a CEO on a video waving a rainbow flag, which are all great things. Awareness and visibility helps tremendously, but execute the change, measurable behavioral change in the people that work for us. And that's a hard thing to do. Because I think in the sense I got from these conversations was that it's our responsibility now not to let this blow over. Doing more of the same thing is not an acceptable outcome. This is not going to go away, but it's our jobs to make sure that it doesn't. It's time to convert our strategy into action. So those are the trends that we saw. What I'd like to do now is play a video of one of our role player coaches speaking with a client. And actually, both of them are role player coaches, but it's translated. So, and it's a meritocracy conversation, as I said. I'll just let it kind of speak for itself. And then we can look at the data from that conversation, as well as, actually, it's about 20,000 conversations that the data is from. And we can glean a little bit of information from that. So bear with me a second while I pull up the right. Are you seeing, Bobby, the Practica Learning logo there?
I do, yes.
Excellent. This is all working. I did this presentation a few days ago and everything went wrong, so I'm so happy. Let me see if
before you
read.
Hi, is that Camille?
Yes, it is.
Hi, Camille. I'm going to be your role player coach today.
Okay.
So can I answer any questions for you or give you any more information about it before we jump in?
No, I get it. I'm just here to have the conversation about your thought process behind hiring as it pertains to diversity and inclusion. Is that right?
That is correct. And
Okay.
we'll be using the skills list in your package as our guide.
Great.
Okay, so I'm going to be Alex for you. As you can see in your notes, you've asked for some time to speak with me. I'm going to take a pause now, and then I'll start us off.
Great.
Okay, here we go. Hi, Camille, you wanted to speak with me. Is now still a good time?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Alex, for taking the time to meet with me today. I know you have a lot on your plate. Now, the reason I wanted to speak with you today is that I wanted to connect and hear your thoughts on where you are at the process of filling the VP role, and also share my perspective on this hire as we move towards the final steps of the selection process. How does that sound to you?
Sounds good to me.
All right. So let's start off with how you're feeling about the process overall. Talk to me about that.
Well, I've actually really enjoyed the process. It's been a great opportunity for me to get more of that senior management experience that I really want.
Good. Glad to hear it, Alex. And I know you've put a lot of time and effort into this team, and that finding the right person for the VP position is an important objective. Now, you submitted a couple of names for your shortlist, Arjun and Felicia. But you indicated to me in your email that you're leaning heavily towards Arjun. Is that right?
That is right. Arjun is my guy. He's the best.
Okay, talk to me about that. Why do you think Arjun is the best for the role?
Well, he is well respected. He's an affable guy. Because of his background in sales, he can manage multiple stakeholders. He's great at managing clients and vendors, but he can really hold his ground when he's under pressure.
Okay, so let's look at the other candidate, Felicia. What did you learn about her during the selection process?
Felicia is great. I just don't know if she's a good fit for the role.
Okay. I need more than that. How do they compare when you look at the key qualifiers for the role?
Both are actually equally qualified. Both have graduate degrees, both have 10 plus years in their function. But as I mentioned, Arjun does have a background in sales, whereas Felicia is from finance.
So what are you planning to use as the deciding factor then?
I guess it just comes down to who's the better fit. It's important to have some of that executive presence at such a senior level.
So are you concerned about the optics of you choosing based on something intangible like fit?
Well, Felicia tends to take things personally, a bit emotional. She really digs her heels in when things don't go her way.
So Alex, do you think that your previous relationship with Arjun unfairly influences you?
No, not really.
But you're saying that Arjun has all the right characteristics and that Felicia is just not a good leader.
No, I'm not saying that.
Don't you think that characterizing her as emotional could potentially be viewed as you stereotyping her? Are you sure you are making this decision based on facts, or could something else be at play?
Well, it sounds like you think that something, look, I'm not comfortable with where this is going.
There's nothing to be uncomfortable about. Where do you think this is going?
Well, it sounds like that you're telling me that I'm not leaning towards Felicia because she is a woman. Is that what you're saying? Because I would never exclude anyone because she is a woman. That is not who I am. And anybody who knows me would say the same.
I didn't say that. All I'm saying is that you need to consider how you may be biased in favor of Arjun and give due consideration to Felicia.
So I should hire Felicia to avoid the appearance of bias. Isn't that discriminating against Arjun because he is a man? How is that any better?
I'm not saying you need to be aware. I'm saying you need to be aware that you can't pretend it doesn't exist. And I want you to make your decision based on fact.
Yep. Okay, Camille, we are out of the role play.
Ooh, you got me mad.
How are you feeling about that in general?
It was pretty uncomfortable, to be honest.
That is fair. And I completely understand that sense of discomfort. I mean, you yourself said that these can be tough conversations.
Yeah.
So let me tell you the way feedback is going to work. We're first going to highlight some strengths from that conversation. And then we'll transition, take a look at some opportunities to make it even better, and hopefully address some of that discomfort. Sound good?
Sounds good. Sure.
Okay. So tell me, from your point of view, what is one skill that you demonstrated as a leader that you feel was a strength?
Well, I thought I started out well, and we were focused on the pros and cons of the two candidates.
You know what? I agree. I actually wanted to comment on that section. Are you ready for some feedback from me?
Sure.
Great. Okay, so you asked a series of strong, open-ended questions. You asked me, why do you think Arjun is the best for the role? How does that measure up against the key performance indicators for the role? And what did you learn about Felicia during the selection process? So I want to tell you that I felt consulted and open and encouraged to actively participate in the conversation. But the real payoff to you as a leader is that you got some crucial information about my perspective. And that allowed you to guide the conversation and to coach me much more effectively. Well done.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so let's transition to some opportunities for improvement. If you had the chance to do this conversation over again, is there anything that you would have done different?
You didn't exactly take my feedback well.
Okay, tell me more about how you experienced that.
Well, you got pretty heated and defensive about it.
I did get pretty heated, didn't I? Well, let's explore why and maybe talk about some ways in which we could have steered this in a different direction.
Okay.
Okay. So there was a critical moment in the conversation where you asked me if me characterizing Felicia as emotional was a potential stereotype. That made me nervous. And I said, I'm really uncomfortable with where this is going.
Right, I remember.
Yeah. And you responded by saying, there's nothing to be uncomfortable about. Where do you think this is going? I'm going to be honest and transparent with you here, Camille. In that moment, I felt attacked. And the result of that was I got scared. And like most people, when I am scared, I get defensive. And that made it really, really difficult for you and I to talk openly with each other. Now, your instinct that is pretty much on target, that I'm leaning towards Arjun because of an affinity bias or maybe even a gender bias. But in order for me to increase my awareness of those biases, I need to feel open to having that conversation. So I want to recommend using the skill of acknowledge with empathy to take down the temperature, okay? And then ask me a probing question to understand my perspective more.
Okay.
Okay. So what could you have said to me to acknowledge and empathize with me in that moment?
I guess I could have said that I can appreciate your feelings, that it's understandable to be nervous or upset by this type of discussion.
Great, great. Okay. I want to give you a chance to use that skill and then ask me a question to encourage me to expand on my perspective, and we can see what the difference is, okay?
Okay, let's do it.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'll start us off. Here we go. I am really uncomfortable with where this conversation is going.
Alex, I can appreciate that these conversations are uncomfortable. I totally get it. It's hard to talk about these issues. You said that you don't like where this is going. Tell me more about that. What are your feelings about this situation?
Well, I don't want anyone to think of me not taking women seriously. It's not who I am at all. I mean, not to mention the consequences to me. If that's the story being put out there, I could lose my job.
Thank you for sharing that with me. This is a really important conversation. Now, first, let me say this is private between you and me. So there's no story being put out there. Even though these conversations can be uncomfortable, I want you to feel safe having them. As a leader, my goal is to help you talk through the situation and share some perspective on any gaps or assumptions in your thinking so that we can make the best choice possible. Would you be open to doing that with me, Alex?
Okay, Camille, this is much better. Now I'm feeling open, more comfortable. So keep going. Now you can be much more direct with me. What were the gaps that you noticed in my thinking? Keep going.
We all have our own individual preferences and even biases. It can't be avoided. So the best that we can do is to try to bring awareness to them and manage them. Okay. You mentioned that Felicia doesn't have executive presence. And I wanted to point out that that phrase can mean totally different things to different people. And similarly, you described Arjun as standing his ground, whereas Felicia digs her heels in when things get tough. Now, interestingly enough, these are the same behavior that you described, but you see it as a positive behavior in Arjun, whereas it's a negative in Felicia. Now, this is one way that different types of biases, conscious or unconscious, can filter into the workplace.
Oh. You know, I actually had never thought about it in that way before.
Great. So Alex, now that we're aware that there may be some unconscious bias at play here, how can you proceed to make the right decision?
Well, I guess I would, as a next step, I guess I could work up an analysis of the two candidates that line up with each competency and each KPI. And maybe you and I could take some time to review that.
I think that sounds great, Alex.
Okay, Camille, let's stop there. How did that go for you?
That was so much better. You were so much less defensive.
Agreed. Now, the simple act of acknowledging the fact, not dismissing or avoiding it, but acknowledging, these are in fact very tough conversations, and that it's okay to feel that way allowed for the conversation to open up. And as a result, I was able to take in your feedback without feeling defensive, as you say.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, you are very welcome. Okay, well, Camille, that ends our session.
Okay, I'm going to stop there and get back to our presentation. So what we witness there is change, is someone uncovering their unconscious bias in a safe environment, not realizing that they had those biases. And that was Clinton, the person doing the hiring. And more importantly, the client in this video was the coach, having her develop her skills of empathy and curiosity effectively to help navigate that very, very difficult conversation. This is one of the reasons I think that this granularity is really necessary in diversity, equity, and inclusion change conversations, is that those biases, conscious or unconscious, are very personal. And if they're revealed in a crowd, in not a safe place, again, referring back to the Merck presentation, which was, again, wonderful, you become defensive, and change is much more difficult. So this is data, this screen is data of about 20,000 conversations over 2019, 2020. These are coaching conversations. And that's another point I'd like to make, is that we're finding that integrating DEI conversations like the one you had into a coaching practice session. So those participants from the video went through 4 different scenarios. 2 of them were DEI scenarios. One of them was a growth scenario. One of them was a problem, high performer scenario. It also sends the message that diversity, equity, inclusion content is just part of our normal work. It's not something special. It's not. It doesn't trigger biases when you send someone to diversity training. We know that causes a lot of problem. It's just integrated into the system. So that's a very key finding for us. But what we found was that if we can accentuate basically 2 skills, one, asking open-ended questions, and there's a lot of different types of good questioning out there. So we kind of put it in the category of curiosity. And that's kind of an intellectual choice. I want to know more about how what's going on in your head, what this situation is, how do you feel? And that's this, how do you feel is the second part of this, which is empathy. So empathy becomes an emotional choice. So those 2 skills balanced really make a difference in these conversations. And by the way, in a coaching conversation, in a leadership conversation, in a sales conversation, in any conversation, curiosity and empathy drive good engagement. And you can see by practicing these highlighted how much they improved those skills. And the key there for us is we didn't have to define what curiosity or good questions were. We didn't have to define why empathy was necessary. Everyone knows that. It's just a matter of using it. And in fact, after the first scenario, most people said, oh yeah, you know, I usually do that and I forgot. And so anyway, the content moves on. I want to be cognizant of time here. So I'm going to, Bobby, how much time do we have?
We have about 5 minutes left, Randy. Is that doable for you?
No, I need about an hour more.
A great session. We'll see you next time.
I am going to jump ahead to basically what we think the solutions should be to this. For DEI policy and strategy become a reality, we think we have to engage at the level of conversations. And certainly Merck's presentation said the same thing, engage at the level of granularity. We're seeing this from all kinds of clients and from gathering information of those trends that we started with. So increasing that granularity also takes out a lot of complexity and it focuses on the individual. What we suggest is there's a lot of great DEI content out there created by the learning and development organizations. And what we're suggesting is kind of flip the model that was pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, it was 80% tell, 80% teach. And what we're saying is make that a small component of it. Make the workshop 90 minutes and make 80% of your budget focused on practicing it, whether it's a simulation, whether it's using live role players, however you want to do it. But that's where people will see the change. And one of the reasons I think that's important is because it's pretty clear pre-COVID that our way of delivering DEI training in the past has not worked. The needle has not moved. The amount of diversity, both gender and or anything else, any diversity in CEOs is at a dismal 5%. It's amazing the numbers haven't changed because we approached it from a old school learning and development premise of tell everybody everything, put them in a workshop. And then COVID gives us this opportunity now to really focus on the individual. We can't afford to do things the way we did it pre-COVID. We really have to focus on self-awareness on the individual. And for us, that means great conversations around empathy and curiosity. So I'll stop there. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to pontificate further.
Yeah, we do have a couple of minutes for you to pontificate a little bit further, Randy. And I think we're getting a lot of comments, by the way, about how powerful and realistic and great that the simulation was there. It's obviously really good stuff. But as far as a question, if you can narrow it down, I'm not sure if you really can, but what are like 2 or 3 of the necessary skills and behaviors that need to be improved for an organization to have more effective DEI, if you will?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things systemically around an organization. And I know people are at different places in their DEI journey. So, you have to measure, you have to put systems in place. I mean, one of the things that could have helped that, that practice session would have been, anonymous CVs. That might have helped that situation. The resumes not having the names on them and looking at the content. I think one of the big thing that kind of sits over, especially for hiring, is meritocracy. And I think that's a great conversation to have, that there is no such thing as a level playing field. But when it comes to the conversational skills, the things that we saw, again, were basically asking great questions, being open to that, and then being more curious with empathy as your driving force there. Those 2 skills alone can help you get through a difficult conversation. It also, as the leader or the coach in that conversation, it also lowers your own ego so that you're more approachable because you're asking questions and you want to know about the other person. There's a lot of things behaviorally and psychologically that are happening. Mirror neurons are firing, so you become more personable. The relationship gets better because you're telling the other person effectively, I want to know more about you. So those two skills drive a big part of it, Bobby.
Okay, outstanding. Yeah, and another one is how do you select who goes through the coaching? People leaders, talent acquisition. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one that we have when we work with very large organizations. You know, we have 20,000 people in our organization. Everybody's going to go through one of these conversations. My first answer is yes. But it depends on where you are in your journey. I think the top leadership has to do this so that they can feel the change for themselves. And that really drives them buying into the change rather than, oh, just tell people they'll get it. No, your VP of sales should go through this. Your CEO should go through this. So that's kind of one level. The next level for me is frontline managers. Those are the places that these conversations get avoided. I mean, is there a more dangerous conversation in a corporation than, oh, I just saw something inappropriate, somebody touched someone or something happened, and now I'm a frontline manager in an office in a warehouse someplace, and I have to deal with that. It's much easier to avoid, and our clients are telling us, even though we've trained these people, even though they know what they should say, they're not. So for me, that's the second most important level, are those frontline managers that are out there having to deal with the boots on the road.
Okay, got it. No, appreciate that, Randy. Unfortunately, we're out of time, and again, some people can pose some questions. Maybe you can reply to those post-event. A fantastic discussion. Again, got tons of comments about how powerful the demo was. Clearly a super timely discussion about exploring the roles of L&D in implementing DE&I strategies and how we need to change the practice and feedback time to 80% versus 20%, kind of do a flip there. I really liked that portion of the presentation as well. So thank you so much again for joining us, Randy. Look forward to seeing you again live soon.
My pleasure, Bobby. Take care.
You too. Thank you.